everybody, I'm Tara from Crooked Row, and today we're going to give you 10 things to think about before you homestead or become self-sufficient or really even gardening. Let's get started.
Every morning I have to make sure that the cow has hay and water and that the dog is watered and fed. In winter this can get harder because everything freezes, so we have to bring it in and thaw it out. During the summer, this takes about 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night, so 30 minutes a day. During the winter, this can take 20-25 minutes in the morning, 20-25 minutes at night, not accounting for thaw out time. So that means 15 minutes or like about an hour a day.
My chore takes about 30 minutes, once at sundown and once in the morning.
It takes 10 minutes for me to do my chores, once in the morning and then once at night.
Jed, what do you say?
Even I have a chore.
All right, so another aspect of homesteading is butchering or culling your animals, and that's just kind of a reality of most homesteads. Those of you who do homestead, you know that as well. But one of the things you do with your animals, you raise them, and a lot of the animals that we raise, we are raising for food to feed our families, and there are pros and cons that come along with that. One of the big cons or difficulties is the emotional attachment that you have for your animals. What do you say, Christopher?
Yeah, they become like pets over time, and so when you go to kill it, it feels like it's like when you have to put down a dog, and so it can be a very sad experience, and you have to be able to stomach that. It can be something that's really hard to stomach, to kill something that you love.
Yeah, certainly. And recently we just had an experience with one of the animals, probably that we're the closest to. Peach is our dairy cow. She went down, and of course we didn't cull her. She got sick and died, and that was kind of rough to go through as well, because we were probably the closest to her out of all of the dogs except for maybe Maggie. As far as attachments. So, but yeah, like we're not even really at the point where we're raising cows for food or meat yet. We've talked about it. We just haven't gone there yet with that. But with the sheep, they're a little bit different. They're primarily for grass management here at the farm. Although we are growing them to get meat, and they're a great source of meat. Tastes really good. We're not quite as close to our sheep as what we were to the dairy cow,
But they're a lot easier to kill.
They are a little bit
It's
easier
still
to
traumatic.
kill, but there is still an emotional attachment that you have to the animals. So it's kind of rough, but there's also different aspects you have to take into account as well, like different costs associated with it,
like equipment. Like most of the animals you're killing are very heavy. Like the only animals that are actually easy to get the process through is chickens, and that's not a lot of meat. But if you have anything like a sheep or a cow, they're going to be extremely heavy. Like a sheep weighs between 150 250 pounds, and so that's hard to move, and it's hard to get up in the air. And so you've got to make sure that you have gambrels and pulleys and wheelbarrows to get these things moved around, because you're not going to be able to carry and then once you do actually get them butchered and you have them all cleaned off, you have to be able to seal the meat, which is a cost, because you're either using like vacuum bags or butcher paper. And then you have to be able to store the meat, which means you've got to have freezer space. And a sheep is pretty sizable. And so you get 1 or 2 sheep, your normal freezer is not going to contain that. You've got to have like a deep freeze or a chest freezer. And so butchering is a good process. You are producing your own food, but you've definitely got to be prepared for that, because it can be a lot.
And so you've always just kind of kind of keep in mind, you know, that you are raising these animals with this purpose, and kind of doing it to protect yourself and just to maintain your, I don't know what you call it, maintain your
preparedness, your
preparedness,
your
yeah,
emotions.
your psychological stability, outlook. So, but yeah, and if any of you have, you know, took part in this as well, we would like to hear any comments or suggestions you guys have. If you'd like to include that, we would love to hear from you.
And if you want a breakdown of the costs, comment below, and we'll go ahead. We will catalog all our equipment and stuff that we bought for this.
Scratch that.
Okay. So yeah, just things to keep in mind. Keep in mind the cost of the equipment. Keep in mind your emotional attachment to the animal, and maybe try not to get too close to it. And also keep in mind how much storage space do you have. So on to the next point.
So another aspect of homesteading is your fencing. Through the years, I have learned, but I have come to discover the truth of the saying that farming is about 75% fence maintenance. And that is definitely true. When you're dealing with animals, they're always pushing, looking for holes to escape. Sometimes you've got trees that fall on fences, things like that, and so you've always got repairs going on to make. But initially, for coming into a homestead, you've got to. It's really nice if you've got a place that's already got pastures in place, you've got your fencing, everything, that's really nice. But if not, you've got to, you know, calculate the area that you want fenced to be able to use for grazing your animals. And so then you've got the expense of all that you need, your fence posts, the fencing. We were looking at it, and right now a typical fence post is going to be about $14, whereas you used to be able to get them for about $5. And so a typical strand of I believe it was about 330 feet, was, what was it, $225, around about $225. So if you're looking to fence an acre of pasture, you're going to need about 3 of those rolls, and then you're going to need 20 to 25 posts per side for the fence. So you've got the post, you've got your fence, then you're going to need your tools for the fencing, and the nails, and so you're looking, you know, upwards of around $2,400
an acre, and that price is rising all the time. Inflation has really affected homesteaders, because however much homesteaders talk about sustainable living, financially, homesteading is very rarely sustainable. You have to be commercial size to be sustainable, and so this does cost a lot of money to do, and that as the economy worsens, that only gets worse. Another aspect that people don't talk about with fencing is it's hard work, especially if you're not using machinery. Digging fence holes by hand is one of the best workouts you're ever going to get in your life, and without like a drill or something to dig those, and the drill will cost a lot. Like, I'm assuming you're not going to buy one, you're probably going to rent one, and they're what, $100 a day?
Mm-hmm. Round about that, yeah.
Yeah, and so you're going to need it for like a good 5 days to get several acres finished.
Yeah. It's definitely a workout. It's nice to think about and talk about, you know, going back to the old ways and doing it like the old timers, but it's a lot of work, definitely. And so putting your fence posts in, especially the initial time, it is a big time investment. To be able to put those in, you're doing good if you can put in one fence post in 30 minutes or so, you know, and then you've got all of those, so not to mention the manual labor, and so it's a big investment to be able to do that. Even going out and getting a rental drill, you've got to go out to the store, get it, bring it back, and then you've got to go around and you've got to, you know, take it to all the places for the where you want to put in the post holes, and then you've got your fence, you've got your we couldn't think of the name of it, but I think it's called like a
Pull bar?
tow cable. It's like
Yeah,
a
the tow
pull bar
cables.
to pull your fence tight. After you've got it up, you've got to tighten it. So you've got that. So all the equipment that's needed for that. So there's a lot involved with it. It does take a lot, especially for the initial investment. But then, as I was saying earlier, you've got your upkeep with the fence because you've got your
Which is the
animals that are
biggest part
breaking
of it.
out. The fence is busting or coming loose and they need to be tightened, different things like that. And so you're just always working on something.
So grass management is probably one of the biggest deals that we have on this farm because we have sheep, we have cows, and we have chickens. And I don't think people realize this, but chickens actually, ours are pasture raised. We feed them, but they also graze all day too. And so if you're gonna have a pasture, so they already talked about fencing. The very next thing is your pastures and what kind of grass you're gonna put down. Do you have those pastures ready? Because we didn't. And now my parents before us, they had some pasture down because they had horses, but we had to kind of go back through and reconsider all of this stuff, and we're still working on it, right?
Yeah.
And with rotational grazing, moving the animals around from pasture to pasture to make sure that they've got enough. They say typically that you want an acre per cow to be able to graze.
Yeah, and so you having enough pasture. And sometimes it's not even just about the space. It's about being able to, confine them in enough room and have more to get so that pasture has time to grow back. Mm-hmm. So people think they can just let them out into a big field, and a lot of times that's going to spread disease because they poop and pee all over this stuff, and it needs time for all of those to kind of go away. Mm-hmm. And so if they have nothing to feed on, they'll go away. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So grass management is a big one to consider. Okay, so next really important one for homesteading is wood burning. And wood burning is essential if you are off grid or you're trying to not use heat, or you're going to use it in combination with your heat.
Correct. Yeah. And so definitely, you've got your different methods of heating the houses, but for most of the people in the homestead, a very common one is heating with a wood furnace, which we had that installed, and we're really thankful for it. But
it's very dirty.
It's very dirty.
It is dirty. It is dirty. You end up getting ash all over the place.
My beautiful front gate rug has burn holes all over it.
Because you really can't help it when those coals start rolling out. They just do.
Yeah.
They will get everywhere and put holes everywhere.
Yeah. And the dirtiness, even like behind Elijah, real quick. I mean, this lantern, I don't know if you can see this or not, but and I just cleaned this. So it's...
Yeah. And so it can get dirty very quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't take any time at all.
Yeah.
Another aspect that you got to think about is how much wood you're going to need, because we talk about 4 cords of wood like that's easy. That's actually, but we talk about 4 cords like almost like that's a trivial amount, but that's almost the back of an entire dump truck of wood. And so then you've got to get that. You've got to find a place to stack it, and it becomes an expense and a hassle in general.
Yeah, a hassle because also like we spent a lot of time stacking our wood. We have to put it up under our porch. If we don't put it under the porch, we try to put it on pallets in a certain place outside, but then you have to tarp it, and then when the tarps, even if you bungee cord them, a lot of times they'll fly off like in some of your more harsh storms. So that's definitely a consideration of where you're going to put it. If you're going to do your own wood, the cost of heating, and there was another one.
Well, and for keeping your house cold, I mean, keeping your house warm, especially in, many of you guys are going through some severe cold spells right now, we are. You've got to have people take shifts to put wood in the furnace at night to keep everything going.
Yeah.
And that can be tough.
Yeah, like right now, the three of them are taking shifts. Like he does 2 a.m., he does 4 a.m., and Christopher does 6 a.m. And so I mean, that's it. Like waking up once in the middle of the night, I think that women can relate because we do it with babies. But you're kind of babying a fire, essentially.
Yeah.
And we have a 945 square foot house, and this usually heats really well, but it is super cold right now. I mean, we're definitely in the single digits, and with wind chill, it's like -24 at night. So I think that like a wood stove is great, but then you also have to think about your plumbing. So
Yeah.
so our plumbing is greatly affected by us not running the HVAC, and so we've had to deal with busted pipes and all sorts of stuff. So these are just considerations that you have to think of and understand that this whole like charming ideal like oh, we're gonna do a wood burner because that's what we did. Mm-hmm. And then you're like 5 years down the road and you're like, oh, we gotta burn wood. But it is good. It does kind of like make us all kind of conglomerate here in the living room. Mm-hmm. It is very cozy. Mm-hmm. I mean, when we just have a heater, you're not staring at the fire.
And this is kind of something a little different maybe, but there is a difference between electric heating and wood heating, and you can feel it. The electric is kind of like a kind of a dry heat, whereas when you heat with wood, it's almost like a moist kind of heat, like you can kind of feel it. It affects you differently. We notice that when you're warmed by wood heating, you can actually go outside and you can stay warm longer outside after you've had wood heat. Another aspect of homesteading you've got to take into consideration is the realities of the water supply. What kind of water do you have? Is it a well pump or electric pump? We have a well, but our well is a shallow well. So they hit water really early on. I think at like what, 17 feet?
Yeah, I mean, I think the well is actually 40.
And so the well was at 40, but it didn't go deeper. But because of that, so we have trouble with iron that collects, comes up to the top.
It's a bacteria.
It is. It's bacteria. And in the deeper well, that's going to be filtered out by the layers of the soil and rock and everything else. So you have that. You've got your water, and then you've got the issues of.
So with the rust, though, some of the things that you have to think about is that your pipes are actually going to start to fill with rust, and so a lot of people will say, "Oh, I don't mind rust. You know, I'll just." Or they'll say, I'll filter my water and things like that. But again, it's another cost that you kind of have to consider when coming to a place with well water, because I'm not even talking about the aesthetics, because we definitely have rust in everywhere. But I'm actually talking about a financial issue, because everything, including like fixtures that we put on hoses. We had some drip irrigation that we had in the garden, and we have to replace it every year because it gets rust in the little, what are those called, weeping holes or something?
Yeah, and it clogs up the little weeping holes that allow the water to come out.
All the fixtures that we have around the farm, they will we have a piece that we put on the water in the barn that allows us to run like 4 to 6 hoses. Well, that has to be replaced definitely every year because the rust just eats away at all of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or iron.
Yeah. Which is bacteria in the water. Yeah, and so it builds up and creates all those issues that you have to deal with, and so that's another expense that you got to keep in mind. We keep talking about expenses. So with the water, so you've got that. Is it electric? Is it well water? And along with that comes how you get it to your animals. Where your pasture is located. Do you have pumps at the pastures.
The pastures that are around our house, it's no big deal because we can actually just run a hose to it and fill their troughs. But like the pastures, like this year, Christopher, I think he did a video on fencing, but he did it, we have what we call it the upper 13 acres. And there's 13 acres and it's like you go up a hill and then there's like a big flat pasture up there of 13 acres. And there's no water, there's no nothing up there except land. And so we had to figure out a way, and you also have to cross over a creek to get there, and there's no bridge. So you couldn't even get on a four-wheeler and do this unless a bridge was made. And we've even done makeshift bridges. But I wouldn't trust it probably for a heavy four-wheeler. Maybe a wagon, but not a four-wheeler. But so that what they had to do was they had to go to our ponds with 5-gallon buckets and fill those and then go across those makeshift bridges and then walk up a steep hill and then get into the 13 acres. And depending on where the pasture was at the time, because it was electric fence and we were moving them, they would have to dump 5-gallon buckets into the trough. If you have cows, you know that in hot weather, a cow could go through 50 gallons of water like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you take multiple trips with those 5-gallon buckets carrying water up to put into the troughs. And so usually, and part of the solution was that we wouldn't fill the troughs up, or the buckets up all the way. Maybe fill them, with 3 gallons and carry that up and make multiple trips that way to where the cows had enough water and the sheep as well, but have enough to be able to drink.
And that also like makes you think of, I mean, there are other options, and so we have learned how to kind of sledgehammer in, I want to say a makeshift well, which we'll make a video on that in the future. But again, these are considerations that people don't think about. And so I know people who would be in the same situation that we are, and they would put in a separate well, like have one dug by professionals. And I mean, you're looking at anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 to do that. Yeah. So again, these are just like, they're water needs, but they're budgetary needs too.
That's right.
Yeah. So
another thing that people don't think about is that we can't take vacations.
Yeah, especially when you have dairy cows. Like dairy cows, I had always heard that people people say you end up staying home, like if you have dairy cows. That is definitely true, but then you also have the problem of, like, we have multifaceted animals. So we have chickens, sheep, and cows. So not only would we have to get somebody and train them on how to do chickens and keep them watered twice a day, but then you also have to, the sheep are kind of easy, but who are you going to teach? Who are you going to teach? Who are you going to teach to milk?
And so if you are going to try and take vacations, you've always got to deal with the problem of you got to leave somebody home to take care of everything. You're almost, once you get to a big enough point, you're almost never going to be able to find anybody who's able to take care of things for you. And so it can be a difficulty. There's a reason they call it laying down roots. Once you're rooted down, you really cannot leave at all.
And this also is, I mean, people are like, oh, so we can't take vacations, but no one thinks of the fact that this includes like issues with going to funerals and that maybe might be out of state and things like that. Like, it's not just relegated to fun. It's also like, Chris's parents live in another state, well, so does my dad. And so you end up like trying to finagle, trying to go to see these people, and because you want to, and it just becomes so impossible. And then we're back to the financial thing again, because you go, not only do you have to think about your vacation and the money that you're going to do for that, or the trip, whatever the trip is, but now you're going to have to pay someone to take care of your animals for you. So that's difficult. So no Walt Disney World for us, huh?
No.
So One thing that I think happens a lot, especially on YouTube, is that everyone sees all the good things and the good things of homesteading, or it's only drama. And we kind of wanted to dispel some of those myths of, so of course we have loads of videos on our channel of how wonderful it is to homestead. But I think that we need to kind of go over a couple of things that aren't, well, and actually that's kind of this whole video is showing that there is, I don't even want to say a downside. What would you call it? What would you guys call it?
I'd say a back and forth, a push, like a balance.
Yeah.
Challenges.
Challenges. There's definite challenges, and a lot of planning and teamwork has to go into homesteading. And so if you have a spouse that is not for the homesteading, I would suggest not to do it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to all sort of be on board and ready for what is coming your way. Also, it is messy work. Like Chris and I had lived in a house in the city, and you can have it like spotlessly clean and beautiful, but when you come to a homestead, it is like next to impossible to keep things like clean like you would in the city. I mean in the spring and fall, it is a muddy mess here.
Oh my gosh, it's terrible. And not only that, but then you're going to have, like, you even outside, you're going to want to be trying to keep things clean, and it's very difficult to keep things clean and organized, and you end up looking like a hillbilly, but you begin to understand why hillbillies are the way they are. They're all farmers.
Yes. It's so true. And so like I feel like that whole persona of, you know, everything being perfect, we kind of want to always show the realism of it all too. I mean, people who garden a lot know that, you know, that's messy work too, and you get your hands, you know, in the soil, and then you come in and you've got a lot of cleanup to do before you can even walk through your house. So, you know, of course, working with animals, working in the fields, like all of this stuff, it's messy work. I feel like we're sort of missing. Also, you know, animals are gross. That's another thing too. Like we have this beautiful view of, you know, we have all these really cute pictures of cows and stuff, but gang, cows are gross. Yes. I mean, they poop a lot.
There's no bigger poop machine than a cow.
No. And you have to do something with their poop. I mean, you can't just leave their poop around. You can't.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it works really good in the garden once you've let it sit for a while.
Yeah, yes. About 6 months. You can let all that poop sit and it makes perfect compost. Yeah. But again, that is messy, gross work.
And it smells. Oh God, the smell.
Yeah.
It's all the time.
Yeah. And the sheep are a little better because they poop in pellets, and the chickens gets pretty absorbed by their bedding. But all of this stuff, like I crack up, you know, they have these like really beautiful chicken coops and stuff. Chickens are one of the messiest, aren't they? They are very gross. When they sleep on their perches, like they poop everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, and if you have a lot of them, that's a lot of poop. And so even when you are constantly refreshing their bedding and raking things and cleaning things, it is just a lot of work. So this like fairy tale, like spreading out corn and all your chickens come to you, and like that's sort of a fairy tale.
Yeah.
like and even like what we have gone through with Peaches. Like we lost our dairy cow and that was really sad. And it was not pretty.
No.
Like her death was not a simple one, and she didn't just roll over and go away, you know. And so she was laying and she was pooping, you know, and we had to clean that poop out, and you have to get in there and do things like that for your animals. And so it's not as cut and dry, I think, as some people would like to think that it is.
There's
especially with animals.
There's a good, a bad, and an ugly side to this, just like there is with everything in life.
Yeah. Another thing that no one thinks about, I think, is storage. Storage is really important Like, it's desperately important on a homestead. We live in a house that has no basement. It's a crawl space. And then we have a 945 square foot house with 6 people. So the attic we utilize as storage, and that's just house storage. I mean, we don't have a garage. We do have a large barn, but what ends up happening is like you'd think that we can we have a huge storage space in our barn, but the problem is that the chickens scratch around so much that they create a dust. So anything that would be mechanical, we can't put in that barn. So that is off for us. So right now we try to utilize our carport, and have been in the works about talking about, you know, building either a garage or a shed or something. But even food storage you have to think about as well. And I know that a lot of people are very into cellars, and I could do an entire thing on cellars because there's so much you have to think about. Like we're on an aqua bed, so it creates wonderful things and difficult things all at once. And so there is just the realities of, you have to have a lot of storage when you homestead. There is times when you are going to have to store hay. So where are you putting your hay? And a lot of people will leave them out. We'll leave like hay bales and things like that out. You should, if they're the great big round bales, if you tarp them, it might be okay. But a lot of times you definitely want to keep your hay very dry for your animals. So that's yet another storage thing that you have to think about. If you have equipment, you're going to have somewhere to store that equipment. Some things, all these things that are battery operated, you're going to have to store those batteries in somewhere that doesn't freeze. And so these are all just things that we have come across. If you are, it's kind of like people who are off grid and they have all of this, you know, washing for their clothes, washing, not just machines, but those like big hand cranked, I don't even know what, ringers. And so you have to have somewhere to store that. You can't just like leave it in your living room all the time. So storage is amazingly important. And if you're coming into a homestead that has nothing, you have to keep this in the back of your mind for design. You have to, I'm not talking about, you know, hauling away holiday items in your attic. I'm talking about important things that you need to store, like tools and gardening supplies or big machinery, just depending on what kind of outfit you're going to run. You could be in the city, and even city dwellers know that they have to have sheds or something to store their things in. And you kind of have to, like, we really thought that we were going to be able to utilize our barn because it's so big, but we had some chainsaws out there that actually were almost ruined because there was so much dust kicked up by the animals that it was just disgusting. So we are now thinking about other sources we can use to try to save our tools. So you want to keep that in mind when you're considering. Okay, so our final bullet point here is money, which is probably the most important one, would you say?
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, so again, I keep repeating that we have kind of gone into this 12 years ago. We went feet first, or head first. We went head first in.
We jumped in feet first.
Yeah.
Landed head first?
Yes. So we sort of did everything backward and wrong. Like we got loads of animals. We didn't have our fencing ready. We just literally, we winged it. Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
We winged it.
We winged it.
Yeah. And so things that you have to think about, like let's break animals down. There's, of course, your monthly, if you're going to feed animals, there's your monthly feed. Please remember that if they're grass-fed, you still have hay to get through the winter. Mm-hmm. And depending on where you're at in the country, like here, that's a good 6 months that the grass isn't growing. So that's a hefty bill.
Yes,
every
large
year.
bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for your cow, like if you're feeding them bales, the cow is going to require one bale. Is it a day that the cows take essentially a bale a day?
At least.
Yeah, at least. And so you got to think about that. So you've got, what did we say, 4 months for the winter?
6.
Six
but the
months?
grass isn't growing.
So yeah. So a lot of times, I think we usually plan on 4 to 5 months for hay, and so you think a bale a day per cow. So that's a good bit of hay.
A lot. That can be a very big bill every year. Our sheep don't do near that much. They go through all, like if we have 5 sheep, they go through about 2 flecks a day
per sheep.
Per sheep.
sheep.
So they're much less big eaters on hay, but there's more of them than we have cows. So still another bill. These are just bills you don't think of. So you have your fencing, which is like $2,500 an acre. And actually, if you think about it, if you're even cutting those into smaller ones, you're spending more money on fencing because there's additional supplies. But even little things that you don't think about, like I mentioned in one of my other videos, I mean, remember when we went to Rural King and the hoses were $70 a piece? $70 for a hose. Like I keep bringing that up because it shocked me. But sort of everything is like that. Like the little pump sprayers that you use a lot in your garden, I mean, those are 15 bucks a piece. And that sounds like a little bill, and it's like, yeah, but when you start adding things up, your planting trays, your potting soil, your seed starting soil, your seeds, your your whatever water delivery system that you have, like these are things that really start to add up. And so then you add that on top of that, like things that go wrong in the house. And but there's a lot of expenses within the house that just aren't included in most people's, in the city anyway.
Yeah. Especially you've got an older ranch house that was built in the 1940s, and so you've got old plumbing, old heating, and so we're dealing with issues on both of those this winter.
Outbuildings, like you have to have, if you don't have barns, you at the very least have to have some buildings for your animals to go in and protect themselves. So you've got to figure out, and you would be shocked as to how much you go, oh, a 2x4 is only, and they could be different in your area, but you know, $3 a board. Well, really start looking at your cut list and start adding all that up. I mean, these start being phenomenally priced. I mean, not in a good way. You just start realizing that you'll have, like, we have that tiny sheep shed, and this was before COVID. And that sheep shed cost us $1,500, and it's just tiny. It's only a 10 by 12. So, but again, this is just more things to consider. Wood burning, are you doing the wood? Like, are you going to, and then you have the expense of chainsaws and tools and all of these things that kind of need to be pretty, I'm stressing Chris out. All these things that you have to think about. And so if you are going to consider homesteading, what you probably should do is first know the land that you're looking at purchasing, and start putting a pen to paper. These are so important. A budget is so important, but a realistic budget. A lot of people, tell you to make a budget and then double it. But I think that if you're realistic and you consider vet bills and fencing and pasture and look at how much the pasture seed's gonna be. Are you gonna have to rent equipment? Do you have plows? Are you gonna have to buy them, or do you need to rent them? We used to buy everything, and now, unless it's something that we really utilize all the time, like we bought chainsaws, we buy chainsaws all the time because we utilize them constantly.
All the time. We haven't bought one recently.
Well, yeah, a year. We haven't bought one in a year.
But like when we were talking about the fencing, like you got your maintenance and up costs with those as well.
Yeah. Because animals tear through. You think in your mind like you have this beautiful solid fence, and then they tear through them, and now you have to go buy more fence. So, or sometimes post rot, or just inexplicable things you don't expect. So clearly you need a contingency budget as well as a normal budget. So I think that like every farm or homestead, or actually even if you're in the city and you're just looking to go self-sufficient, it's best to do this from the budgetary standpoint and realism. I mean, even if you build raised beds, if you're in the city and you have raised beds, depending on what wood you've used and the technique that you put them together, you're gonna have to build those again. Yes. So like sometimes your cheapest option is to go right in your ground. I know it's not as easy, but we don't all have choices all the time. Like we don't only do in beds, we do right in the ground for a lot of things, because as much as we do on a half of an acre for a garden, there's no way we could do all of that in raised beds. There's no way. So it's just, I think that money is the biggest topic. And so you've got to figure out what you can spend, stick with that budget, and then be realistic about what projects you can and so we're not trying to discourage anybody from doing homesteading. We're trying to get people to be realistic, and maybe you start with chickens and you get your chickens completely set, and then you move on to, you know, another type of livestock after that, and you get all of your pastures set and seeded, and you have a good rotation, and maybe start out with like 2 cows or 2 sheep. 3 sheep would probably be better. That ram would pester her to pieces. And just kind of see how it goes, what you're up against before moving on and doing like what we did. Because that was stressful. It was really, really stressful. And even now we still play catch up on things, don't you think?
Yeah, totally.
Like if sometimes it feels like you fix one thing and literally the next day you hear, oh, the fence is busted over here.
It's never ending.
Yeah, it's never ending. So we want to encourage, but we want to encourage realistically. And so I would say.
And so homesteading is, if that's what you want to do, it is definitely worth it.
It's definitely worth it.
It's hard. It's got a challenge. Of course, you have challenges in any station of life. But
we couldn't live any other way now, I don't think. Like once you have done this, you're kind of ruined. I don't think I could go live in the city now, could you?
No.
It'd be hard.
No, it would be very hard. To imagine, yeah, living, yeah, in a city condition. Once you've had land and animals and property. So remember,
if we can homestead, anybody can. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.